how to
do what, share?
Yeah. There.
Give me a second.
Okay, so I guess we can go through the shepherded items first. Then we have constant variation. Do you want to anything new you want to say, Morris?
I don't think so. No.
Cool.
Nothing's changed since last week.
And then we have the FI unwind stuff.
No major updates except, so the current status is we've been trying to investigate this, like fill out the question of should C support unwinding. By the way, did we send a ping to everyone?
I just did on Discord.
Okay. And we've kind of elaborated all the arguments, I think. Actually, more or less had done so last week, but we took another stab at it. Yeah. And this morning, I created a branch to, like, I still would like to see some data, basically, on the impact of the various choices. And I made a branch which is like 90% towards implementing the option of the C ABI unwinds all the time, but if you have C panic equals abort, it aborts if there is actually an unwind that occurs. I have to finish that, or maybe get someone else to finish it, and then try to measure the impact on, say, fuchsia. That's the plan. Because we don't know right now what impact that has.
Right. So, didn't trait stuff, the sentence before.
Yeah, so I didn't yet make a lot of progress there. We ran the crater. There was some impact. I was able to identify a few changes that would be easy to fix, and I need to do a rerun. I found out that there's a way to use crater where it only runs the, like, where you give it a list of crates versus checking all the crates. So I can narrow it down. What's that?
Job is, I scheduled a job that only has the regress crates in it.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Oh, you're awesome. For my PR,
just ping.
Wonderful human being. Okay, well, then we're running crater.
Yeah.
I didn't know that. This would happen if I checked my GitHub notifications more regularly. So yeah, so we'll have a little more data. That would be useful, but it seems like the impact is a small number of widely used crates more than a large number of crates, period, which is always good, but not as good as a small number of crates. So I don't know if that makes a difference to us. I don't really know what the alternative, like I don't presently have an idea that is not what the one I presented so far. There might be some variations that make it a little more, like a little less breaking or something. But I'm not sure what those variations are right now.
I have a question about that crater run that Ecstatic Morse just mentioned. It seems to have the same name as the previous run, the previous experiment. Is that normal?
It has the same name as a deleted one, but not as the original one. So if you delete it before it runs, I believe, it doesn't increment the index.
I did not scroll back far enough. Thank you. Okay.
Yeah. Also, if anyone else wants to run on specific crates, there's like a script that I am using currently. So just ping me and I'll do it. But I will integrate this into Crater upstream at some point.
It would be so great if you could say like Crater recheck or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You can write. Oh yeah, you can write check. You use that.
While how hard would it be? I guess this is the wrong place to talk about this. But I'm gonna do it anyway. How hard would it be to integrate Mark's tool that like analyzes the root regressions while you're
We were talking about this in the release team meeting actually.
Not that it was so hard to run, but it would just
we've sent a message to the triage working group. Maybe someone there would like to implement it. But that would be really fantastic.
It would be great.
All
right. Well, that's the current status, though. In any case.
QMX, do you want to talk about the current working group? And use no updates.
Yeah, no updates. Everyone's busy.
Uh,
I will have for next week though.
Yeah. Type and fallback. That's on me, I think, somehow. I don't really have anything to say. Should I have something to say, Nico?
No, I guess not. I think probably we should loop more with L-logic. Or so it was L-logic, right? Who was, or ill-logic.
Yeah.
I never remember if it's an I or an L. But
I think that can be tracked through the compiler team. I don't think that needs to be brought up in the line team for now.
Yeah, there was the fallback. Anyway, we haven't done anything, so we still have to.
Yeah, and FCP is almost over, so you could actually, if when you have time, review the PR, the code. That would be great.
Okay. All right, improper C. So we go to this p-high. I now managed to share it. Took a while. Should we talk about this C-type thing? Is there?
Yeah, I think we should.
Yeah. You want to go present it, or Josh, one of you two?
So we made a change to the improper C-types lint so that it would fire on. I'm not sure. What change did we actually make?
I believe it was changed that functions with extern C type we get checked, as well as functions in an extern C block.
Oh, right. So things in blocks were checked before, but not exports.
So before we only tested functions you might call, so to speak, and now we're testing also functions that might be called. Sorry.
Right. So before we were checking imports, but not exports.
Okay.
Imports meaning those in external blocks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so this caused some problems in server and in other places, and people complained a bit, and then we went and reverted the PR because as lint works right now, if you have a pointer to type, which is size, then that's well defined. But the lint complains about it anyways, and it has always done so. But now it triggers for more. Now more cases get analyzed.
Mm-hmm.
And so the question is how we should proceed. And Robin has an insightful comments with respect to the one part of the lint being sort of about well-defined semantics in FFI, and one part being like preventing foot guns and more of a catching bugs rather than what you cannot pass. And the point is that if you do accept such a pointer, it might be that you go and dereference it on the C side, and then you have a problem. But if you only use it through the pointer, then it's fine.
And also, if you only use it through code that's compiled by the Rust compiler, you're also fine, right? And it's just the kind of code we're talking about because it's in an extern C definition being compiled by the Rust compiler?
That's a good point. Yeah, so specifically, the reason this is more problematic now than before is basically exactly the import-export, that we're now talking about data coming into Rust versus data going out to C, and maybe those two things are not like the same.
Right, yeah. Oh, actually, that gives me an idea. No, that wouldn't work. Somehow, because with such functions you want to export them, but if you are using them inside Rust, then there's no problem.
Yeah, so maybe the premise is actually flawed, that there, or at least the lint, not the premise of applying a lint to these cases, but the premise of applying the exact same rules to both cases.
Well, what R. Krupp suggested was potentially making 2 separate lints, which maybe is already linked.
But that seems, how I understood R. Krupp's comment was the orthogonal sort of division between the lint currently has, it's like out and out UB, and then there's foot guns. And that's true in both cases. And I guess my point is that the set of things that are the like line of how likely something is to be a foot gun is different also separately. Like it's more likely to be a problem on a C function you're calling, although it's still not a guarantee. I mean, for sure. Interesting.
So yeah, for example, you could be passing a pointer to a Rust type into C, which then is going to call a function that you defined in one of your crates.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really common to have a my library, make a new context function, and then a bunch of functions that pass that context back in, and it's convenient for that handle to be a pointer to an opaque type.
Right. You can definitely do it correctly in either case, but like
possibly we should.
It's particularly likely to be correct when you're writing Rust code right now that's going to access it. Right.
Yeah. Maybe R group's like division is like still like relevant. Like maybe we should have the UB types lint applied in both cases, and the like likely an error lint only applied to like imported items.
I think what I would imagine that's possible. I guess I'd have to look at all the cases. I'm just saying that maybe both lints, or maybe the likely and error lint would apply to both cases, but it would take into account which kind of thing it was when deciding whether to lint or not.
Right, right.
But I don't know. Or maybe there's 3 lints.
Which one would the third be?
Likely to be an error on a foreign item versus likely to be an error on. Depending how you can. I don't know if that really makes sense. That seems a little.
2 is
already
probably,
overkill.
I think that's good. You can use a lint group and stuff to like bundle them. But 3 is overkill. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't have a strong opinion. I mean, I think as long as we're not flagging super valid patterns all the time. Okay.
So
someone should write up. It's not like we reached a firm decision here, right?
no, I don't think we did. But I think you have a good handle on it. Maybe both, perhaps.
I'm willing to take point on it if no one else is.
Cool, thank you.
Looks like I did these. I
Um,
didn't do those.
So the coherent stuff we already talked about, so we don't need to talk about it again.
Which is this? Oh, wait. Yeah, we talked about the coherence.
So this table of trait objects, type ID stuff, have people had a chance to read this? I didn't. I haven't
looked closely at it. I left a comment and I haven't looked for any responses.
Seems like a response was left.
I'm sure. Nice. So maybe there's a work item here of just, I can circle up with Alec a little bit about making sure we check in on this from time to time or something, but I don't know. I think this seems like a good direction. It's definitely complex enough that I'd like to see it written out. But we should decide how we feel about this problem overall.
Do you think you could summarize?
What the problem is that they're trying to solve, or what the mechanism is?
Both.
The problem is they're trying to solve serializing and deserializing trait objects. And I kind of forget what the mechanism they're proposing is, but I think they're basically allowing, I think what they're trying to do is there's some linker mechanisms that let you have different crates each contribute pieces of data that get collected at the end, and then you can sort of iterate over them. dtolne has a crate that lets you do this too, although it doesn't always work in all cases.
Inventory.
Maybe it's called inventory, I don't remember. That sounds right. And like other similar use cases might be collecting all the tests that are defined or things like that. And so the idea is they're going to try to use this mechanism to collect information about trait objects that get used by different crates, which they would then potentially expose to enable deserialization. I think obviously the trickiest part, the interesting question here is how are they going to expose that? What exactly information is being collected?
I'm looking quickly at the code in the PR. It feels like they're using some, definitely feels like linker hacks in some form, and giving guarantees about like those things being hacky. And there's some comments about tier 1 platforms as well.
Yeah, I think so. Platform portability would be something we'd want to make sure we understand. Yeah, let's. But I do think there's like a need here for sure. But so. I don't know.
Yeah. Do people here? Well, on my end, I can't say that I understand. I have read this in sufficient depth to like still make an informed, have an informed opinion on it. Do people here feel like they do?
I have not read it in depth to have an informed opinion, but I have heard this complaint raised. Sort of
in that case,
anecdotally from time to time, which is part of what affects my opinion.
In that case, I would suggest that we move on.
Yeah, I think that seems good.
Okay.
Might be worth, I don't know. Yeah, maybe we should like make sure dtolne is looped in here too. What is going on with this? Fixed sound is plug 18510 by aborting on unwind.
So this is a little stale at the moment. This was originally proposed in the midst of the arguments about FFI unwind, and this was effectively, hey, let's go back to aborting, but only on safe functions. So this was kind of a proposal in the midst of the controversy. I think the right answer now is to just close it as postponed and say awaiting decision from the FFI working group. Sorry, waiting decision from the FFI unwind group, I mean.
So
I feel okay about that. But.
So personally, I would like to merge this, but I don't want to spend too much time on it. I do think that it would be good to close this out, to fix this console. In the interim.
If we were going to merge a thing now, I would sooner merge Ralph's thing that drops the no unwind attribute from LLVM in the short term. But we don't seem able to do that either. But this one, the main controversy is it means that unsafe would suddenly start having a semantic effect on the program. And I'm really uncomfortable with that idea.
Well, there is some slight difference. I mean, it is true that this one is triggerable from pure Rust code, but unlike the other case, right? But I guess that doesn't seem like a huge difference since FFI is pretty common. There would be a more minimal version of this too, right, where it doesn't give unsafe semantic meaning. That would basically just make it impossible to panic through a externcy barrier, I guess.
I mean, at that point, we would be going back to the behavior that we reverted that was causing people problems.
I see. Okay. I see. Yes.
Yeah. I think our best bet with this one is to postpone in favor of the work of the FFI unwind working group and then let them do their work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
that's reasonable.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to spend too much time on this.
Okay. I'll write a comment.
Thanks. Okay, let's see. The last week we talked about the attribute macros on inline modules, and I think we sort of, well, we made some progress. I'm not sure we reached a conclusion, but Felix is assigned to this one, so take it away, Felix.
I mean, I feel like my attitude is sort of the same as, I think if the semantic, at this point, the semantics that's being suggested here is the semantics we would obviously want. The only argument that I've seen, that I can recall for not merging this is just the sort of weird, oh, we're supporting this case, but not the other. But it's not like, I don't think we're going to discover a different semantics for the out-of-line module case. Or sorry, we're not going to discover a new semantics for the inline module case through the exploration of the out-of-line module case. So the only question is just this, level of surprise to people of, oh, this is only supported for inline modules. And maybe the argument of, is that surprising? And then, I don't know. I just don't see, I'm not sort of in Petrochenkov's camp of like, I don't understand why we're delaying stabilizing this, except that it's just a little weird to only stabilize this case.
I thought we sort of decided to go forward.
I sort of think we did as well. So I guess this is waiting on Felix writing up like a summary comment and FCP merging and stuff.
Right.
Perhaps.
Last time we talked about this, I supplied a sentence that might be usable as documentation to explain why it is that this only applies to inline modules, not out-of-line modules. That's sitting here as the second to last line on the bullet points. So if that's useful in writing up a summary comment, then please feel free to use it.
I think at the moment it's not relevant, right? Because we actually will just error if that statement appears. But
yeah,
Although I agree with I think that is the semantics we're ultimately going to want. Right, so basically I thought last time we concluded it would be nice to have a shepherded group, but it feels bad to hold up progress.
The only other thing I'll mention is that I can imagine, maybe this is silly to bring this up now. I think I said the same thing last week, that I can anticipate Petrochenkov saying, are we going to beta backport this or not? Like stabilizing this, which I assume is just no, we're just not going to. Okay.
No, the reuse team would be very unhappy with that.
All right, I'm basically having deja vu right now. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, we don't backport stabilizations without a compelling use case. Very compelling.
Yeah. Don't know what that would be.
And certainly not here. Okay. So Felix is going to write up a merge comment.
Cool. Let's see, next one. Rust shouldn't warn about snake case and patterns. So in this case, the field is a bit weirdly named in the variant or in the struct.
If you scroll down a bit, I put the actual error in here.
Right. And they're using a field pun. And I guess the question is whether we should stop doing that for field puns specifically.
Yeah, I think it would be a reasonable lint to disable. We should be warning at definition time, not every time you then use it. Once you've got the field, then you're not making it worse by using it.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
I mean, you can still have you aren't forced to do this.
You aren't forced to, but it's more, you are matching the structure, gratuitously renaming the field to something else doesn't seem valuable here.
On the other hand, if you do name, when you actually name the local variable, in that case, well, if you are destructuring, then you, yeah, I think it would be reasonable.
I feel like
the thing go ahead, Nico.
Okay, you can go, but well, I think what you're saying, Scott, is that like you are correct. You're not forced to use the same name, so it depends how much we care about local variables having snake case names or not, or whatever. And I feel like I care very little. I know that there are definitely times when I choose to deviate from the Rust patterns, and I don't mind putting in allow, but I guess I think we should like push a little, and if the user says they don't want us to push, we should just stop.
Yeah,
that's my feeling.
I am all for us warning on a let. This is more like the field has already been named, and so giving multiple warnings for what feels like the same issue feels like we're twisting the knife.
The thing I'm pondering here is, what's the likelihood that you're doing this and you haven't just disabled this at your crate level anyway?
I think it's not zero.
Reasonably good, actually.
Yeah.
I commonly see crates that disable the snake case requirements at the top of a file that was generated by BindGen or otherwise written to match some external API, but everywhere else in the crate they want this enforced. So I think it's perfectly reasonable to expect that it's turned on at the code and turned off at the structure definition.
I would back that up and say that when I do deviate from the patterns, it's usually because I'm matching some other names from elsewhere, and I might like to do that just at the point of definition.
Exactly.
I can also imagine external crates being another case where your own crate, you want this lint on, but you pull in someone else's enum.
Exactly. Yep.
Oh yeah, it's another good one.
That makes sense.
All right, seems like we're gonna, unless Anyone?
No, fair.
Okay. Who wants to write it up? I say Josh.
I'll do it.
Arc drop has this. I don't think there's any new updates in here. This is. Did we talk about this before? I don't remember when we last talked about it.
Not sure. Doesn't seem like it.
The short version is there's some really hard questions around the dereferenceable attribute and ampersand, and especially around interior immutability. But I think that we won't have time to really get into this, and I don't think we'll reach any conclusion. I would sort of rather talk about the organizational questions below. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah, does anyone have any burning desire to talk about this right now? Doesn't seem like it. Okay, let's move on.
Did we look at nominated RFCs?
I did a quick skim through those.
Okay.
The previous time we went through these, we processed a few of them. I wanted to call attention to one or two of them as well.
You're talking about the RFC bot pending list?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry, you're talking about a different list.
I was talking about this nominated RFC list, but I don't think there's anything new here.
Okay.
I don't really remember exactly what's going on. I think there's some pending comment on this. I think it's actually a subset of this list below. So go ahead.
Yeah.
What did you want to call attention to?
I was just going to call attention to a couple items here. I think that default behavior of unwinding really wants to be like closed postponed in favor of what we're working on in the FFI unwind working group. And I
That
wanted to
sounds
call
correct.
attention to target feature 1.1, which would be FCP merge at right now, except Central, you have a blocking issue from 6 months ago saying,
Yeah, I know.
more
I
and
saw
define
your
it.
email.
Okay. So just wanted to call attention to that one. Those two, rather.
I think that's
Yeah.
good. Can anybody at FCP cancel, or does it have to be the one who proposed it?
Anyone can do it. honestly.
Anybody on the team can.
So one of these which I would propose we cancel is the uplift lints. I think this has gone nowhere, and I think this will continue to go nowhere. It's like too many lints to go through, and I think we should go through them one by one. And both made the comments about guidelines.
There's a lot of concerns here.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we should cancel it, yeah.
Both made the comment about guidelines, which makes sense, but I would suggest that we sort of develop praxis and guidelines by doing, like by going through them and one and like developing guidelines.
It seems like an ideal, I hate to sound like a broken record, but seems like a good sort of shepherding group sort of thing. Like either we're going to do it or we're not. I don't personally think we need a group on this because I'm not feeling a lot of priority, but if someone like had a lot of passion.
Well, there's one thing I wanted to mention that I think is related that came up in the cargo meeting yesterday, which I think is worth discussing very briefly here, because we do commonly, as a resolution to things, say, hey, that ought to be a Clippy lint, not a regular lint. And so we care a little about the status of Clippy because we kick things over to Clippy sometimes.
Yep.
There was a general feeling and consensus in the cargo team that based on kind of one more pull request that was trying to fix Clippy issues and add them to CI, there was a feeling that the defaults on Clippy are much less curated than the default lints on Rusty and much less focused on avoiding false positives. There was a feeling of if somebody would sit down and curate the list to remove some of the things that people very commonly disable, then the remainder would be a lot more useful, but there wasn't a feeling of seeing that likely to happen in the near future.
To be fair, I kind of feel like that's what they tried to do.
Isn't that
I'm not suggesting it hasn't been done. I'm trying to suggest that there was a general sentiment of there is more work needed, and there's a few obvious ones that are pretty subjective and probably shouldn't be on by default. This was things like your function has too many parameters, or your function has too much cyclomatic complexity.
Okay, so there's two things going on. One is maybe Clippy has too much noisy defaults, but the other is whether some of these, like these ones that represent genuine, pretty likely bugs, should be up-ported to Rust-C.
Absolutely, yeah. This is separate from this issue. I'm just bringing this up because it came up, and Clippy is relevant to the Lang team because we kick things over to Clippy sometimes. I thought it was worth bringing up that we might want to join in with that conversation with the DevTools team working on Clippy, and worst case, if it doesn't get solved by then, I think we ought to have this happen at the all hands.
I want to argue the opposite of what I just argued a little bit, actually, speaking of that. I think there's definitely a case for, let's let the Clippy team own lints. Let's work with them to develop, like, we agree on the sense of what belongs in which place, but do we really need to micromanage which lint? We can give our feedback if something goes wrong.
I think we should continue to do it in Rust-C, but not in Clippy.
I mean, I'm arguing for let's let them bring things to Rust-C and see if it becomes it's a problem. Maybe we can make some.
As in, let's let them propose things one by one, and we are hands off on it.
I don't know. I'm just basically saying that could be one way, but one by one would be fine, or this mass list. I'm just kind of saying that I think we should agree on some guidelines, but we should trust like Ali and Manish and people who work with lints a lot to apply them.
Have guidelines?
What's that?
Did the Clippy RFC have guidelines for what should be where?
I think it did.
Because if they already exist and they're all, like my experience with turning on Clippy is it just told me a bunch of things that I didn't care about, or there were enough of those that whatever.
Right. This is the
I certainly don't want those over, but
it said
there was a pretty detailed review of here's what should be uplifted, here's what shouldn't. Somebody needs to actually curate it, but that curation aside, there was a pretty extensive review on 53224, and there was a list of here's what wouldn't have false positives and is finding real bugs.
Right. They go over the list here of there's some pretty good categories here, and maybe I forget already. Like for example, like looking over this list, I forget the argument for why clone on an ampersand t is a correctness bug. I think it comes down to you don't expect the type that you get out from there. And I think there were some examples where it leads to bugs, but you could argue it. But I'm just kind of saying, I guess you hear my message, that I think it would be good for us to agree on guidelines, but sort of let them go. And if something it seems like it's having a lot of complaints, we can back it up.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I just don't want you'll probably yell at me all the time.
I agree. I don't use Clippy because I don't like to get yelled at, even though I'm sure but I also hear a lot of great things about Clippy. It's definitely a selling point for the language.
I just never merge everything it suggests. I merge about a third of what it suggests.
But that's by design. It's intended to be used by allowing things.
But I don't think, right, I agree with that, but I also don't think that, I don't think Ali is proposing to make the compiler behave like Clippy. He's trying to be more selective.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. The thing I find that's weird about Clippy, something an awful lot like that in C# in an IDE, where all it does is like put little dots and offer a suggestion that's really easy to ignore. But whenever I see a Clippy output on a command line, I'm like, I never wanted to see all of these.
An alternative might be to, I don't know if there's some way to do this experimentally. Like, I would kind of like to see what it's like with this on for a little while before
Yeah.
agreeing to turn it on for everyone. Like maybe merge them in with a lint group that is by default allow and that we can turn on our projects.
We could only turn on for multi or something. But as a general point about lints, I think they're quite different from diagnostics in that they sort of, if you have a bunch of lints, they have the power to change a lot about how the language is written. So I think it makes sense for the language team to like keep dealing with lints.
I do want to, yeah, I'm not saying the language team has nothing to do with lints. I'm just saying I don't want to have like a whole lot of process when there's, well, I don't know if we need a whole lot of process when we have people with experience saying these are here's buggy patterns. Most of these things are not related to like.
So what I would
stuff,
suggest
right?
is that we like, if we try to go through them all at once, it becomes overwhelming. But if we like every second meeting we spend 3 minutes or something talking about one, then it becomes manageable. Or maybe a bit more than 3 minutes.
But like, yeah, we can do it. Just also, Ollie did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can use that input.
Feeling on this is, I read the RFC and I'm like, there's a lot of stuff in here, and I'm not sure I necessarily agree with some of the positions in there, but I do agree with a lot of the actual lint. Like the previous phrasing of like, maybe we don't actually need an RFC for this or whatever, or one super mega issue is the wrong way to go about it or something. And if people just make PRs for things and
what about a trial?
Everyone's like, yeah obvious win, success, and then we just keep going.
Yeah,
like,
I think that's...
we do that with other lints all the time. I'm not sure why we need these came from Clippy before. If people say, hey, good one, then great. But we also add lints without going through Clippy, and that just takes a PR.
I think you're exactly right.
I think that works. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
So we turn this list into a, this list basically becomes a checklist item in a migrate Clippy lints to Rust-C task, and we'll decide on a case-by-case basis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems plausible.
I think signing off on the whole thing is just too much of a scariness.
There was value in having a policy discussion of which Clippy lints do we want to uplift, but having had a lot of that discussion, I think the right answer might be let's go do this on a case-by-case basis and review on a case-by-case basis.
By the way, Scott, do you want to take that on to council and write something up case by case?
The other thing I'd think would be really interesting and potentially if we wanted, there's a bunch of those that are like unit makes no sense here, or if you pass 0 as this particular parameter, it will always throw. So we wrote a lint about that. I think some sort of extensible diagnostic something or others.
Oh, you're saying
would be
some
a
way
really
for people
neat
to annotate their functions to say that. Okay, that seems like a interesting but separate idea.
Yeah, but I look at some of those lints like iterator step by 0. That's a super specific lint for a general problem.
Sure. It's kind of like
you can just
following the must use, but
yeah.
So do you
must
want
use
to?
Is a great. Go ahead.
Not to cut you off, but do you want to do the case by case uplift? Write it out as a proposed plan.
Sure, I can take that one.
Thanks.
Okay.
Let's see. Where are we?
I just want to say one last thing. I don't think we need FCP merge on each one of those things. Just a thumbs up from the Libs team, or like nominate and thumbs up should suffice.
Yeah, agreed.
Maybe a poll, but not an RF, but not a FCP or something.
don't use the poll. It
No,
doesn't
just
work well.
I mean, just like we did here with
okay.
this, Ross shouldn't warn about snake case, right? These smaller decisions don't merit a whole FCP cycle.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, I agree.
Okay.
I was hoping that was poll, but if the answer is don't never use poll, then let's not use poll.
Well, the problem with poll is that you get pinged once and then it doesn't show up anywhere, so it can usually takes more time to actually do than FCP because.
But maybe that's the ideal thing here. You get a record, and then, you know, what's wrong with that? That's actually matches what we're talking about, right?
A couple of thumbs up on the poll, then you just check it in, and great.
Okay, up to you.
I don't know.
What I prefer
I could go either way
personally, but the latency is not so high.
Up to you.
I'm kind of game either way also, but I'd like to discuss this last point, and we have 15 minutes, which is probably maybe enough.
How to organize
really
ourselves?
Enough. It's not really enough, but we could start it. So I sent out this mail about whether to have a second meeting, especially to discuss the roadmap, but also other things. But I wanted to give a little context, especially because nobody answered the doodle, and I'm not sure, maybe it's a bad idea. I want to get some feedback and see what people think. So I wrote down a few of the concerns that are on my mind that I'd like to sort of address. I guess this first one Central wrote down, but I think I agree with it, which is, or it's kind of the same as this one, these 2 points. Basically, that I would like it to be very clear at any given time, what are the things, both to us and to the community, what are the things that we're like actively working on, and to try to have it so that RFCs and discussion is really concentrated on those things. Also so that we know what to pay attention to. I think that's not the case right now, right? We have a lot of open PRs on the RFC repo. Most of them are like not a high priority from our point of view. And it's hard to figure out which ones we should care about. So in a related way, I think we don't have a good channel for lower priority things to kind of make progress. We wind up, instead of using RFCs, we wind up people nominating issues and PRs to sort of sidestep the process. It works okay, but it doesn't feel ideal. Or it feels right now like if it's small enough, you can squeak through that way. Otherwise, you get unlucky. We ask you for an RFC and it just gets lost in a lot of stuff that will probably take forever to get back to. I'm not happy about that. And I would like to have, not everybody can make this meeting on a regular basis, notably Ralph, but I'm sure this must apply to lots of people. And I would like sometimes to have longer conversations, period, and also time for them to make it. That requires some advanced scheduling. So what I was thinking about was taking a bit of a card from the way the compiler team's been operating and having 2 meetings per week. It's worth noting that we currently spend, at least some of us, 90 minutes doing the pre-triage and the triage. The idea would be to sort of not do that, reconfigure the time so that we have a detailed discussion meeting that it's on one track, and then like a shorter triage meeting where we're not spending as much time on things. I was even thinking of having a timer, literally, to keep us on track. And if something's taking too long, we shunt it off to the other meeting, or to a side meeting, however. And the idea would be that we mostly discuss things from our shepherded list or issues that have arisen that are complex, but we have a sort of, while we're scheduling, like every nth meeting, we try to keep as a wild card to handle some lower priority thing that maybe we do want to make some progress on, so that there's like a side channel for new stuff to come in. And I wanted to hear what people think. I mean, my main concern is I don't know if everyone can manage 2 hours a week or 90 minutes. It's more than we're doing now. I don't know if I can manage it. But on the other hand, I feel like there's a need for more detailed discussion that is not being met.
I think if they're not back to back, that'll, I mean, ironically help. I don't know about other people, but for me, like, I think having the 2 meetings back to back, I'd have a hard time context switching. Maybe that's not the case. But.
I definitely expect them to be separated. Yeah, I agree with that. It's going to be hard.
Yeah, that will help prevent topics from bleeding from one to the other, which is really easy to do when you've got the same participants and the same call.
I think for me, it depends mainly on what time. But
yeah,
we'll figure out the doodle and stuff.
Let's posit we can find a time that works, I guess. though I think that is a challenge. I didn't actually say this out loud. I guess another part of this that's been on my mind was that we would potentially, like nothing I wrote here actually addresses this question of open PRs in the repo. That was a separate thing, which I was thinking that we might do, basically migrate the open PRs to like issues on the linting repo or to some other thing where there's like a clear separation of things that are proposed to be discussed and open PRs would have like a linting liaison or something, which you kind of get by opening an issue and getting someone's attention. And that would be, the regular review process might help us to find things like that. That's, yeah, it's kind of a separate thing, but I think they go hand in hand. So not hearing a lot of comments, which is fine. I guess, do we want to, I'm trying to figure out how to interpret that. Are people pondering, or is it just, yeah, this seems like an okay idea, we just got to find the time?
Yeah, I said this in the Zulip channel. I'm not prepared to commit to a time. I feel like if I commit to a time now, it's just going to be in a month. I'm going to say, oh, that time, maybe that time will still work, but it might not, because I'm with a 6-hour shift in time zone.
That's a good point.
In a month.
So maybe we should delay that for a month.
That, or I can try to plan ahead. That's the other idea.
Or we could send out a new doodle in a month.
Yeah, we can change.
I think there's value in finding a time, having some meetings, and then we can always find another time.
Maybe we should just explicitly set for the next 2 weeks or something. Or, I mean, I'm going to be on vacation in one of those weeks anyway, so we try to schedule a meeting for next week to do the roadmap discussion.
I'm sort of eyeing the time slot before or after the design meeting on Fridays for the entire team.
It's plausible. Yeah. All right, well, why don't we discuss the timing? I would be okay delaying the start for a little bit anyway, because it'll probably take us some time to get organized. I think we could use the time to sort of write up and discuss a little more, especially if we're going to couple this. I wanted to make an RFC about the migrating of RFCs and the liaison policy, because I think that's a big enough thing that I would like people to see about it and hear about it. And I could imagine trying to start in the new year, for example, but it's not that far away.
So we have 6 minutes. Do we want to continue talking about this, or maybe we could talk about something, some other small thing?
If there's another small thing, it's fine. Otherwise, I'm happy to discuss this later or more over Zulip.
I don't think that's the case, so I think we can call it a bit early then.
Let's call it. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.